Welcome to California in Focus. I'm Eliana Kernodle. California government officials and big tech are nearing an agreement to jointly provide at least $242.5 million in funding for journalism, including local and ethnic outlets. Joining me to tell us more is the Center Square's California editor, David Mastio. David, what is this agreement? What would it do?
Well, it would take about $70 million from California taxpayers and more than $150 million from Google to put together a fund to be spent over several years to fund journalism and AI research in California. It is unclear who would get this money. It is unclear how much will be spent in which year. It looks like about $100 million will be spent in the first year. And it's unclear, is the bulk of this money going to go to the LA Times and Gannett and McClatchy, who both own multiple papers in the news in the state, large media conglomerates? Is it going to go to TV stations that are doing better than newspapers? One thing that is clear is that some of the money is going to be reserved for very small and ethnically focused outlets that cover minority news in the state.
And this agreement came about because of sort of some conflict going on between Google and some of the newsrooms and some legislation that was proposed. What was that legislation and what kind of problems did it cause?
The legislation proposed a tax on the advertising revenue that could be traced to California from Google and other social media and tech companies like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And those companies objected loudly, and Google went the farthest. It blocked some readers' ability to see links from California journalism sites in their Google searches. So it was directing traffic away from California media sites and doing further damage to the industry.
And what was kind of the concern that had led to this legislation? Like, why were they wanting to tax this?
Well, since the advent of Google and social media, about 75% of the revenue of the newspaper industry has disappeared. A significant amount of the revenue, the advertising revenue of local television stations has disappeared. And Google, YouTube, Facebook have hoovered up tens of billions of dollars in advertising revenue that used to go to local news sources. Now, Google and YouTube and Facebook, they don't employ serious numbers of journalists to get local news. And so that loss of journalism has meant fewer journalists covering fewer government meetings and government activities and following up on whether politicians do what they say they're going to do, once they get into office. And as a result, there's just less scrutiny of government and big companies in states and localities. So the hope was by taxing and distributing the money to news organizations, we would be able to rebuild some of that news media infrastructure.
And so this new deal that they're coming up with is supposed to kind of balance that out a little bit and solve that issue so that these local journalism won't be cut out of search engines. But the Media Guild West, which represents California journalists, is not a fan of this deal. What are their concerns?
Their concerns are not really clear yet. They haven't gone into great detail, but I think the core of it is they really want to take a whack at the tech companies who have damaged journalism, and a tax would be a big symbolic win that would show that the tech companies really did do damage to the journalism industry. And by making a voluntary agreement, the state legislature is not branding tech companies as having done something bad. And I think the News Guild wants to have that symbolic win.
Yeah, there was kind of an interesting quote from the president of that organization in a bulletin that said this isn't regulation, it's ratification of Google's monopoly over our newsrooms. So very interesting. Well, thank you, David, for your insights on this story. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.